This is Getting Past Subtitles. My name is Sean Peel.
And I'm DK Lee.
And welcome to week number 2 of our comedy haha series. Right? So last week, just to recap, we watched 20. Pretty good film. I like that one a lot. But now we're on to another favorite of mine in a different region of Japan. And that would be The Taste of Tea. Came out in 2004. It was directed by Katsuhito Ishii. And let me think. If I was to describe this movie, right? So in the opening scene, we have Hajime, who's the son, and he's chasing after this crush that he had who just left town. And then a train comes out of his forehead. And you're like, all right, that's kind of weird, but I'll roll with it. And then there's like beautiful B-roll of the town because they live in like the countryside, and there's like the cherry blossoms, and it's all very sweet. And then the next scene, you see Sachiko, who's the daughter, like 8 or 10 years old. She's got this really empty look on her face. And then the grandpa kind of is in a separate room, and he peeks from the window, his little window, and then closes it every time she peeks over at him, and then does it again and again, and it turns into this little game, and it makes you giggle, right? And that's like the movie to me. It's like silly, quirky, but also sweet.
And kind of surreal.
Right?
And yeah.
And it just plays, like the comedy plays for those like happy, innocent giggles most of the time. There was an IMDb review, and like the title had like a really good way of saying it. It was like absurd comedy and poetry. And I was like, you know what? I think that's a nice sentence of I would think of this movie is. But just to get into it a little bit, so Japanese movie is called Cha no Aji. This is Katsuhito's 3rd or 4th feature. He's been inactive for a while. His last movie was called Haro Junichi, and that was made in 2014. So it's definitely been a few years. But he's mainly an animator as well. So he's actually mostly known for being the animator, director, and character designer for Kill Bill Volume 1.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I mean, you can see a lot of his animation roots in this movie for sure.
Right. And in that animation scene, I think that's very similar to the Kill Bill sequence as well. A little bit in style, right?
Yeah. And yeah, I mean, the story is about a family of animators, right?
pretty much, yeah.
The grandpa was an animator, the mother's an animator, and the brother-in-law is also a manga artist. But
right.
Close enough.
they're all cut from the same cloth anyway, right? So that was his probably his most well-known work, and this movie came after he did that, actually. Excuse me. And so like he's basically how he did Kill Bill was he did his debut feature, which was called Shark Skin Boy and Peach Hip Girl, I believe, and he premiered it at the Hawaiian Film Festival. And Quentin Tarantino was there, and he liked this movie, and they, talked and hung out. And then when he was in pre-production for Kill Bill, when he was in Japan, he reached out to Katsuhito, and then pitched him the idea. And so he ended up doing that. And then he had done a couple features in between, and Taste of Tea came in like at a 3-year gap from his last feature at the time, because I think he did Kill Bill, like I said, in the middle.
When did Kill Bill come out again?
That's a good question. 2001, 2002?
Oh, really?
Right?
I don't remember at all.
Something like that, maybe. And then basically, like, Taste of Tea for him was definitely new. I was reading that, well, like, a lot of his other stuff were adaptations from, like, manga or anime. And The Taste of Tea was actually his first, like, IP, you can say, his original script. But it was very non-traditional because he thought about it episodically, which I think translated over really well to the movie that we saw. And so he just kind of thought about, this family and wrote out different scenes and then just kind of compiled a montage of episodes essentially into what became this movie. But I think the motivation is definitely there in that it was very like personal film, right? Like just something to please himself over like, trying to justify or like bringing justice to an adaptation of something else in that way. So I think that, really kind of like I said, translates over well into the final film. I'm pretty much citing an article from Midnight Eye in 2004, so give that a read if anybody's interested. It's a good article. But enough about that. I'm interested in what your first impressions are, because you have nothing about this movie.
Yeah, I mean, this is the first time that I watched the movie. I think I loved it. I really enjoyed just the whole aesthetic of it. I enjoyed the quirkiness of it.
Right.
It's funny because I don't know if I would call this like a comedy though. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
But it is definitely it is funny in many different ways.
Right.
And I think that comedy is definitely a big part of this movie. But like in the traditional sense of like just a pure comedy, I don't know if that would be, but I don't think any of the movies that we watch currently are like that. So
right, yeah.
It's fine, but I think it's very. I like when I was watching it, there's this like weird almost spiritual quality to it.
Yeah.
In the way that there are moments in the movie, especially when they're drinking tea, when I feel like it's very kind of tranquil.
Yeah.
And you really get that sense of it. And just like how the whole family is together, and well, not all the family, but usually most of the family is there, and they're just quietly
in those times,
drinking tea, and they're just like there's nothing really going on in that frame, right? Like it's just them drinking tea and kind of like absorbing the atmosphere. And I think that really sums up almost what the movie is also kind of trying to do, like the message of it, maybe like the underlying spirit of the movie is kind of a like finding peace in the midst of all of these different things that are going on, and kind of coming back together to the family, right? And,
right, yeah.
And almost regrouping in one sense.
Pretty much, yeah.
And coming together again. And I really enjoyed that part of the movie, as well as like the funny bits, but it's a very like quirky movie. So I wasn't like laughing out loud. I was more like, what the hell is this?
Yeah, yeah,
you know what I mean?
yeah,
like,
exactly.
I was so like dumbfounded by what's going on. I was like, what the heck?
It's funny because like after our last episode, we talked about like the comedy that would make us laugh, or like the comedy that we appeal to, and you said like you're more of the giggler. And when I was like halfway through this movie, I was like, oh snap, this is definitely like in Lee's alley.
Dude, I was like, dude, there's so many different moments. I was just like, this is so stupid. Like, this is so crazy.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was definitely enjoyable. I really liked the structure of it too, like the different ways that it interweaved the different lives of the characters.
Right, yeah.
And how it wasn't necessarily like linear in all that.
Right.
But it's kind of very slice of life in one sense.
Yeah, yeah.
And kind of having these like moments or different scenes where it's like there are moments that are highlighted that kind of show us like what they're going through or their character or some, interesting plot point.
Right, yeah. I was going to say too, like, I found it really interesting this time around. But like I said, because I remember the movie being very sort of chaotic and, like you said, non-linear. But also, like, it is a little linear. Like, each character has their own storyline or, like, arc. Like, they're definitely trying to accomplish something for the most part. But it interweaves, like I said, just, like, little moments and, like, little oddball scenes and stuff. But, like, it's all weaved really well. Like, just the flow of the movie really carries through. And also to the point that this movie is actually a lot longer than I remember it being.
Yeah, it's 2 hours and 30 minutes.
Just about. Just about. Or like just under 30 minutes. But like I said, I mean, you're really entertained like through and through. And I was definitely more happy that it was longer because I just really wanted to see more of like this family and like what, more scenes that, was going to be shown off and stuff like that. So
yeah, there's definitely a lot going on in this movie, and a lot of stuff happens in the movie.
Yeah,
none of them feel very overwhelming, and I don't know if it's like a good or bad thing, but it's an interesting thing. I think like watching it, it never felt like I never want. It wasn't like something like, oh, like what's going on, or like, oh, like when is this gonna like move forward? I never had that feeling. I was always kind of interested in what was happening in that moment.
Right.
And being able to do that for 2 hours and 30 minutes is pretty. It's a pretty
good deal.
good feat. Yeah, I think
Yeah.
like it felt natural, like watching the movie, and like it didn't feel like I didn't feel like I wanted something else, right? I was always engaged in watching that scene or that moment. So I think it did a really good job in that respect, like, you know, creating a movie that is really long but it doesn't feel long, kind of.
Right. Yeah. No, I 100% agree. For me, obviously I brought it up, so it wasn't my first time watching it, but it's surprisingly not more than my third time watching it. And I had to like.
So it's your third time or your second time?
Either my second or third. There may have been a second watch through somewhere in like the years, but I really don't remember.
Yeah.
If I haven't, especially because like there was a lot that I forgot watching this through, and I was like, oh yeah, that happened, or oh wow, I totally forgot about that character. But I do have like, unlike Story of Yonosuke, like I definitely have limited my watch with this movie, just because personally, like I think this movie is a true gem of like Japanese cinema, in the way that it's super unique, right? Like, of course, in like the comedy and like its structure, and it's funny because in Japan, I think the stereotype with their comedy is being super outlandish and like super weird and like just straight over the top, you know?
Yeah.
And that's very much like if you think of Japanese game shows or like reality TV.
Yeah.
And this movie kind of is in the same lane, but not really. Like I said, it has a very tranquil element to it, right?
Yeah.
And that I think that the movie, well, basically just being a movie and not like anything else, kind of makes it like Katsuhito has a pretty clear tone and intention with it. I think that really separates it from its own thing. Like, this is a movie that it sure is kind of like quirky and silly in scenes, but there's like an element that you can actually appreciate about the film.
I mean, there are chaotic moments for sure,
right?
But it's not like the main focal point, I feel like, of the movie.
Right.
I think it's trying to tell you something about that. You know what I mean? Like it's more secondary to what it's trying to really tell you.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
It feels more of like a personality of him than I'm just gonna do weird quirky comedy. It just feels like him as a director, or like his style is, my type of humor is kind of weird, you know, and like that just sort of translates into, you know, the scenes or the moments, right?
Yeah.
So that's kind of the semblance that I get with it. But it just does feel like completely different from like any other movie that I've seen. And also just like, it's just really well made, and there's like lots of familiar faces. It's kind of easy to watch in that way too. So, why don't you do your best here, bro?
Sure.
What do you got?
This movie, there's just so much going on that I probably won't be able to go through everything.
Best of luck.
But I'll just give a very like basic synopsis, hopefully, of the movie.
Under 3 minutes.
So, A Taste of Tea is a slice of life story about a family that lives in Tochigi Prefecture. The father is Nobuo, who works as a hypnotherapist. Yoshiko is the housewife who's looking to get back into animating, and so she's working at home creating like an animation so that she can. There's like a club or something like that she is a part of, and she wants to showcase it there.
Yeah.
And there's also Hajime, who is the son, who is in the puberty age, and I think he is he in high school? I'm not quite sure.
I honestly want to say middle school.
Yeah.
I honestly couldn't tell you, but
around that age.
Yeah.
But he is his crush recently left the town, and so he's kind of in this, you know, limbo. And while he's in this limbo, another girl comes into the school. A new school girl comes, and he instantly falls in love, and he's trying to figure out a way to kind of get to know her. And there's also Ayano, who is the uncle who came back from Tokyo to kind of de-stress and kind of reflect, and also kind of make amends with his former lover, I think it is, and he's trying to do that. So he came back and he's kind of with the family and doing that. There's also the grandpa, who is just basically the grandpa who kind of helps the mother with her animations, but also he's just kind of, he's really old, but he's kind of out there, and he just he's with the family. He jokes around with the kids, and he's just overall just the typical like funny grandpa that's there. And the youngest is Sachiko, and Sachiko is this young, I think she's 8 years old, and she is a girl who has her own problems. And we realize that the problem that she has is that she periodically has this gigantic version of her like staring at her and looking at her. And she sees this periodically, and it's really giving her problems. And she's trying to figure out a way to get rid of that big version of herself. And that's basically her arc in the story. So we kind of mentioned the mother. The mother is trying to make the animation, and that's kind of her big arc. Hajime, like we talked about, his big arc is kind of getting the girl, or getting to know the girl better, and finally overcoming his hurdle of not being able to confess, because that was the big thing that in the very beginning scene that we realized, or he narrates, I think somebody narrates,
the narrator
the narrator narrates that he has never been able to confess, and even if he went and caught the train, he probably wouldn't have done anything anyways. And so that's his big dilemma, is like finding a way to confess, and that's his big arc. And Ayano's big arc is finding making amends with his ex, and kind of coming to terms with that, and also going back to work and finding peace there. The grandpa has an interesting arc where his arc is kind of a part of everyone's arc as well. He just like observes the people around him, his family, and he is always there with them. And basically he passes away because he is very old, right? But then at the end, he has these like booklets of all the family members, and it has their names on it. And the family members, after he passes away, they go into his room and they find these books, and they look at it, and they realize that it's books that he made for all of the family members. And it's basically animated. Like, it's basically drawings, but if you flip them, it's like those like animated pages.
Like a flip book. Yeah,
flip book. And he made them for all of the family members when they were doing when they were living their life in their, moments. And so that's kind of his arc. And that's basically the whole gist of the story. That's the biggest things that happen with all the family members. There are like different smaller like side plots that happen and things like that. Mainly regarding like the brother-in-law. There's also the part with the Yakuza stuff that happens, and
very in the background, sort of.
And I think I'm missing one more. Oh yeah, there's like the guy who's like this weird dancer dude on the beach. And so there's a lot in this movie that like
just kind of
is just part of the movie. Like, you don't even know why it's there, or like the big significance for it, but it's there. And it just makes the movie just better. I feel like it just adds this element of like just intrigue in the movie, that like really, I think, becomes like the it's not like the main part of it, but it really gives it the flavor in the movie.
It's like, it's the tasty fat that's like, you know what I mean? That's in there with the meat of it.
Just moments where you're just kind of like, what the heck's going on? Like, for example, like Hajime and the father is like on the train. Like, these two guys come in with like this big, I don't even know what the mech.
Yeah, some mecha. I think it's. I don't think it's legit. Like, it's
is it?
Yeah, it's like
Okay.
completely like fake for the
Yeah,
movie.
like a mecha like suit like thing that
Yeah.
he's wearing, and
They're like cosplayers.
yeah, cosplayers, and they like suddenly start like posing, and there's this photographer who starts like taking pictures for them, and it's just like so weird and quirky. And like there's this other moment when it's the same cosplayer dudes. They come out of a train, and then the Yakuza people come and like they beat up this one guy who was like about to run away.
Yeah.
And later on, that gets connected to another moment when the dude who got caught, it basically gets buried alive.
Yeah.
And then Sachiko finds him and all
to, like,
that
dig him
stuff.
out and, yeah, it's crazy.
So like there's just so many different like little side plots and things that just happen, which is not part of the main like story arc.
Sure.
But it still adds so much to the story that like it's just pretty crazy just how much that they put in this movie.
Yeah, there's lots of stories and characters like within the story that just kind of that really just makes it's like world building. Like, it just makes the world feel fleshed out in a way that, you know, what we're watching is a world that's lived in, and that you understand that there are things that are happening without like what we're watching. Sort of. It kind of adds to that. Like, the world is moving, you know, more than, you know, these characters that we're seeing in a way, but we are kind of seeing it just sort of secondhand in a way. But very much comedy and like quirkiness, and like you said, like it just makes for the best parts of the movie, I think, honestly.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think I would think that just that whole thing between the train scene and then that Yakuza guy, or like the guy that owes money to the Yakuza, because they're connected. It's probably like the funniest bit in the movie, just because it's like the longest, but it's like absurd at the time. Like, it's funny. Going back to see the photographer randomly taking pictures of the cosplayers like on cue is the funniest thing I've ever seen. It's the fact that he's like posing with him. He's got the flash
with the cameras. Like, let's go.
It's crazy because like they're doing like the cosplayers come in and they're doing a bit and they're like arguing with each other, and then they like suddenly get along and start reciting like the opening of whatever anime they're cosplaying. And then there's a photographer like on the other side of the screen, but he's like a bystander in the scene, and then he all of a sudden just turns into like part of it, you know? It just happens organically.
And it's great because like we were first with the main characters, and it's like the main characters are there. And then Hajime keeps looking at the cosplay people. And then the dad's like, stop it. And later on, they just go, it's like, whatever.
Yeah. And then they get off the train, and the cosplay guys are coming out, and there's like a drunk dude. Yeah. And he like bumps into the robot guy, because like his cosplay is like really, really huge. Yeah. And like, whatever, he like doesn't pay attention. He's like, you trying to pick a fight with me? You think you can take me on? He's like, whoa, relax. And he like smacks the shit out of the other guy. And then all of a sudden, like, these two Yakuza guys come in and like take him away.
And you know what's funny? It's one of the dude is the guy who was doing the baseball.
Yeah, the baseball. And you're like, oh, that guy's a Yakuza?
Yeah, what? Exactly.
And he's like, beats the shit out of the drunk guy. And then they literally just like randomly throw him in a car and then drive away. And then like everybody on the scene is, what just happened?
Yeah.
And then they talk about it over family dinner. And you're like, there's no way that happens.
It's pretty crazy.
Yeah, it's hilarious. It's funny. So I want to start off by asking, so who is your favorite character, and like what is your favorite arc?
I think my favorite character is Sachiko.
Damn! Stop stealing my shit, bro. I really went into this thinking he's not gonna take Sachiko.
Why?
I really went into this wholeheartedly. Like, I stole his favorite scene last episode, but there's no way he's gonna take Sachiko this episode.
What do you mean? It's the best arc.
Hop off, bro.
You know what I really loved about it? I love the fact that she just was eavesdropping on a conversation between the uncle and Hajime.
Oh yeah, and
that's the reason why she started doing the flips.
That's like her whole like arc right there.
That is just like pure gold right there. Like, that was my favorite, just because like the story was so elaborate, And the story was so crazy too.
Oh yeah, that whole thing.
And I was just like, oh my goodness, this is so dumb, but it's so good at the same time. Like,
it's like, I saw this egg and it was like huge,
but it was like half buried on the ground, and I was like, why is it half buried on the ground? And he's like, I had to take a big ass dump, and he's like, I don't know why, but I had the urge to just take a dump
like
on the egg. And I'm like, what? Like, why?
It just compelled him to take a shit.
And then one day I just started seeing a ghost follow me everywhere. And it was a ghost with tattoos all over his body. And he's like bloody and tattoos all over his body.
Like, I don't know why he was following me.
And like every time I would be cleaning, he would just be there. Staring at me.
And then like it's funny that like the layers kept adding. He's like, I don't know why. He's like, this guy that just kept following me, but he didn't say anything. And he's like, he kept following me more. And he kept adding more details like, oh, and he had tattoos, and oh, there was a shit on top of his head. Like, you couldn't start with that. Like that put all the pieces together.
And then like when he says it, it's like on his head.
Yeah,
and the dumbest part is like the shit that was on the egg was like so unrealistic.
Yeah. It was like the perfect like chocolate scoop of ice cream.
And you're just like, oh my goodness, this is just too much.
And
then later on, you find out that it was a yakuza, a skull of a yakuza, and then the detectives are like, but why is there like shit on the head?
He's like, it's so fresh and like perfectly. And then the forensics guy is like looking at the detectives all stupid. He's like, no, the skull first, shit was second.
Yeah.
He's like,
way later.
Duh. He's like, there's no way. Look how fresh this is.
Yeah.
There's no way it happened at the same time. He's like, we should collect this evidence. He's like, you do it. Like, gives him the gloves.
I love like Sachiko's innocence there. Like she's like, oh, like okay, I guess I just need to do a horizontal flip.
Yeah, and then like his answer was like, yeah. So it was like, well, how did he go away? He's like, well, I was at a playground and I was on like the pull-up bar and I was practicing my flips, and when I finally got it, he just disappeared. And she was like, revelation.
And she was like, I don't even know if this is gonna work.
Yeah, I like that the most. That even she was like, actually, I kind of think that's a stupid idea. And then for like a good third of the movie, she's like walking around, and then she stumbles upon like the abandoned park, and she like looks at the bars and it's like, nah, and it turns away the first time. Like, that's a stupid idea.
Yeah. But like getting back to why that Sachiko's arc is my favorite is the fact that like, you know, she constantly tries to do the flip and she never could do it. But once the grandpa like passes away, and she looks at her own book, and it's the animation. It's a flip book of her actually making it, right? Her actually doing the flip on the bar, and that prompts her to try it again, and she finally is able to do it. And I just feel like that's such a perfect like wrap up of that story or that arc. That's why it's like my favorite. It just works so well. Like the fact that the drawing of her being able to do it kind of instigates her actually being able to do it in real life. Yeah. And then that whole like sequence with the sunflower and like her
God
going into space and all, and like
the sunflower just like envelopes
eating up the universe is just like so crazy too. But
that whole I was like, what? Well, it's funny. So in my mind, from what I remember, I actually thought she did the flip first, and then she saw the book, and it was like a drawing of her like doing the flip, like because he saw her do the flip. But then this time around, it wasn't the case. I was like, oh, it happened afterward. Yeah. And it does lend itself to being just a really nice wrap up. The whole movie, really, because that's the ending scene. Yeah. I mean, it's actually kind of long, the whole bit, because then the sunflower thing happens.
Yeah,
and
you're just like, what is
happening?
Yeah.
And then she like, I guess she finds like just like enlightenment at the end. Like she's like floating down. Yeah. She's like, and it like lands on the ground, and then it's like the beautiful like everybody's watching the sunset like a heaven's like golden hour. Oh, yeah. But I really liked that she never smiles in the movie up until the very last scene when she's like after she does the flip. Yep. I really thought that was just a nice little touch. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I felt the same way when she finally smiles.
Yeah. And so, yeah, Sachiko is my favorite for me just because I think her character is awesome. It's just such a spin on like the traditional 8-year-old character in a movie.
Mm.
Like she's really just not a kid. Like, because the whole movie she's got like an empty face.
She's got issues, man. She's got big issues.
She
got to figure this out, and like that's like taking like so much of her, like, mental power.
Exactly. She's like, forget life. Like she's like straight up depressed, and then like she just stands out so much. She's going through like the teenage angst or like the confusion of your early 20s, but like she's this 8-year-old girl who's not putting up with your shit.
Mm.
But like, yeah, it's so funny and intriguing to me to watch that.
Yeah.
So every time I watch her, I'm like, Sachiko's my spirit animal. So like, I understand her so much.
Yeah.
Yeah, I really like her a lot. I would say though, my favorite arc is Hajime's. I had to change it my second watch through. Mainly because I'm just a sucker for like the fly on the wall Japanese high school boy like one-sided romance archetype, And then particularly for this movie because it's not the whole film, but it is like a nice chunk of it. But it's also like super innocent and like, he's very private and like introverted.
Yeah.
And there's all these like funny little moments where he's like, the spark of like, oh, I love this girl. And then he's like super excited and he's like, has all these like imaginations in his head about her. And then the whole thing comes full circle in like the way that it's delivered and he finally confesses.
Yeah.
Just like that whole thing.
I loved his delivery of like his confession too.
That scene
where he's like
is my favorite.
Yeah.
For sure.
Where he's just like I want to like be able to play Go with you every day.
Yeah, it's like I've dreamt of.
Oh yeah, I dreamt of playing Go with you
every day. She's like, well, you should.
Yeah,
and like that's it.
Yeah,
it's like it's super simple, but it's like this is perfect.
Yeah, and she's like, oh yeah, let's play every day then.
Yeah,
it's just such a like. It would have been cringe if he was like, I like you, It would have been so like typical, right?
Right.
But like the way that they delivered it in the movie is so like subtle, but also like very like it makes sense for him to kind of do that in that way,
right?
Because of his, because he plays Go all day with his father as well, and like that's kind of part of his life as well, and so. Using that as a way of like bringing that together like really worked.
Yeah, it's like because Hajime is a not confident character at all, and that was the whole hurdle that he had to kind of to overdo for himself was to just gain confidence to do it. And then in that scene, like it was really smooth, and he said it very comfortably and confidently, but it just happened organically, and also like they're busy playing Go, like you said, right? Like it's not a traditional confession where he's like in front of her or like passing her the letter or anything like that. It just kind of happens in the game as if they were talking in the middle.
Yeah.
So it really fits, like you said, with the whole thing. Like the guy's been banging out Go for like the whole film, I think it's funny that he turns out godlike, right? He doesn't even join the club for like a good portion of the film. And he doesn't join until he's like forced to join because he gets caught in the library checking out the books. And they're like, oh, I'm the captain of the Go Club. Like, you got to come. And he's straight up forced. He's like, you're coming.
Yeah.
And he, like, beats everybody in the club room. And he's just, like, waiting. Like, is he going to play with Suzushi? Like, is that ever going to happen? And, yeah, it's perfect. The whole thing is really, really something.
And, like, even like, when they finally do play, it's not him that instigates that, right? Like, she's like, oh, do you want to play a game with me? And he's like me?
Really? Yeah.
He's like, okay.
And it's set up so well, right? Like it's because he's playing and he's there playing and she's in the room, but it's other people in the room, and so it's like I'm not gonna go talk to her by myself.
It's like awkward, right?
Right.
Because like there's too many people, but like there's that one moment like near the end,
right? Yeah.
When the guy that she was playing with had to go.
Yeah, and nobody's
and then
there.
like he just runs into the room. It's like it's just me and you. This is kind of weird.
he was gonna pounce though. He was like, I guess I'm just gonna leave. She's like, but wait, you want to play a game?
Yeah.
I love the cutaway of like one of the captains is like actually hiding in the corner, and he's just like watching the whole thing happen.
Yeah,
it's so awesome. Like this little magical moment I just witnessed.
Yeah,
that was funny.
And I also like the moment when like it's like raining outside. and like he like they walk together with the umbrella, and then like they finally catch up with the bus.
Right.
And then like he like throws the umbrella inside the bus, and he's just kind of like waving
and running.
Yeah.
It's like yeah, it's super like dramatic in a way. I really liked opposite that when he like instantly fall. Well, I liked the slow motion like windy for no reason scene
in the classroom.
Like it's super stereotypical in that way.
Yeah.
But for like literally no reason. And it's like slow motion, and he sees her, and he like has this captivating moment with this new transfer student, and then she's just sort of awkward in the classroom, and then he eavesdrops on a conversation where another student was like, "Oh, what club are you gonna join?" She's like, "I'm gonna join the Go Club," and she's like, "Go?" Like it's so kind of out of her character a little bit. She's like, "Yeah, that's what I played at my last school, so I'm just gonna join that club here." And like Hajime immediately is like, and like. Beelines out of the school and rides his bike across country back home, and it's like a solid 5-minute scene of just him like just like biking it and pedaling it back home, like screaming out "go!" like he's confessed to her.
He found a way.
He found a way. Yeah, he's like,
there's like that sliver of hope that he just got from the one word that she said.
Right. He's like, this is my new path to play Go.
Yeah.
And it's like that, and like his attitude, but the fact that his bike sucks so much, like the man is pedaling for dear life, and he's not going nowhere.
Yeah.
That bike is so slow.
I also love that moment when the first time he pedals back home, and he passes by that like I don't know if it's a restaurant or like and like the guys are in that restaurant or whatever, like, and like one of the guys is like dressed up as a girl trying to fool Hajime.
He's like not taking that shit.
Yeah. That was great too.
It's such a subversion of like an expectation. It's like you have a whole scene with them and they're like, whatever, doing some sort of bit in the restaurant.
Yeah.
And then they're like, oh, like Hajime's coming. And then they try to play a joke, and Hajime's just like, nope. And the students are like, yo.
Yeah.
Like wasted effort. Yeah, that's gold. That's gold. God, just the whole thing. Like he gets home and he's like, where is he? He's like out of breath. He's like, ah. And I love that Ayano and Sachiko are just like
laying
chilling right out there. You're like that. Like they had like a super stressful day and they're just like chilling on the deck, you know? And he's back in his room and he's like tries to set up Go. And then he's like on his desk. And all of a sudden it's like the dialogue box and he's like imagining that somebody's messing with his girlfriend, like he's dating her, and he's like, you want to fight?
The boxing.
The boxing.
Dude, it's so good, man.
Oh man.
Seriously,
it's
just like
it's like
you would do, like a kid would do that, you know?
Yeah,
like, it's
exactly.
just so good.
Oh man. It's like it's funny because it's not even like it's kind of cringe in like a hindsight way, but when you're watching it,
I mean it's like cringe in the sense that like a kid doing that is like cringe, right? But it's like it's great because that's the nature of children. Like that's the nature of like a person that age, and it's just so like like you look back on your own life and you're like, man, like I've done some like cringe things, and it just like reminds you of that, and you're just like,
we've all had that one-sided like observation, crush
like having
class.
A crush on a girl, and like you know you don't do anything, but. You don't even confess to a girl, but like you have all these different like thoughts and different things that you do, the dumbass things that you do, right?
Like hoping maybe one day.
Yeah.
Maybe one day. Like, why did you start playing Go all of a sudden? Don't worry about it. I just want to play Go now.
Exactly.
Okay? And that's what just makes it so much sweeter. Like when he actually gets the girl, because it's like like
right. It's so relatable, right? Like that, like his predicament.
Yeah. It's like rooting for you, Hajime. Rooting for you. So yeah, that's definitely my favorite arc for sure. Not discrediting anybody else, but it's definitely the best one. I would argue though that the dad and the grandfather don't have arcs.
Yeah, they don't.
Like they're really just both in support of the story and everybody else's arc. The grandpa more than the dad for sure.
But the dad too. He doesn't really have like a strong arc.
No, not really. Like the most he does is like when
He hypnotized.
Yeah, besides the family. Yo, that's the craziest. Like, it's funny that we don't even know like what the dad even like is or does up until that scene.
Yeah.
And then even then you're like, what's going on here?
Yeah, like, why is he?
Okay.
Yeah.
And then like I figured like, oh, is this just like I remember thinking like, is this just like a hobby or like a talent that he has? Like
Yeah.
maybe he's like actually a doctor or something, or like a pharmacist or whatever. But then like later on we see that like that's his profession.
Yeah.
And you're like, that's wild. That's just crazy.
I love it because it's like the whole family first starts off, right, with the hypnosis. And then like once only like half of the family members get actually in a trance, and they're like, you guys just go and watch TV or something, you know?
It's funny because like the way that like it's just like they're all there, and then you can clearly see like who's falling for it and who's not in that shot. And then when like he finally like catches them or puts them like to sleep or like in the trance, it like cuts to like the grandpa, Sachiko, and then like Hajime like at the table. But it feels like this isn't the first time. Like they're like they've never fallen for this shit. You know, it's like the same like 2-3 people that like fall for it, you know, like maybe they don't know, kind of. It's just like hilarious. Like, all right, you gonna do your thing, Dad? Go ahead. And it's just like watch TV. Even the TV bit is hilarious. Like that is actually really funny to me with like the forest girl. Like they find a girl who's like I guess abandoned in a forest for like 13 years. The jungle girl. And then they like brought her on to be like a comedy skit. So like in Japan, a big comedy. I forget what it's called. But basically, it's like a duality. It's like two people go on stage and they play off of each other as like a stand-up comedy. And so they bring this girl to be like the second partner for one of the bits. And like she's like all neat and dressed and stuff. And then he's like introducing her like, this is the girl, this is the famous, you know, jungle girl, blah, blah, blah. And then like she like says the joke and he's like, no, you gotta wait for your cue. And then she's like, I'm a tiger, or like I'm a saber-toothed tiger. Yeah. And like chaws a chunk out of his head. And then there's like
there's like, no, I'm fine. And he started bleeding like crazy.
And everybody on set is like out on the run. It's just wild. Like it's part of like the stupidity of the show.
Yeah.
And everybody on TV is like, so what else you want to watch? It's gold. Like it's just great.
Gotta talk about the brother-in-law and what happens with him.
Iki. So there's like so this time around I had to piece it together because it's not really said, but so Ayano is Nobuo's brother, so who's the dad, and then the mom, Yoshiko. Yoshiko is a mom. She has a brother named Iki, and he's also a mangaka. Like she's an animator, but I mean they work in basically the same industry. But I guess he lives in Tokyo still. And there are like a couple scenes with him, and he's like super weird. Like he has like a bob, and he's like super like.
It's so weird because it feels so out of place.
It
right?
does,
when he first comes out.
It's like, why is this here? Like, right.
And also like the scene and like what happens in the scene is just so like out of place too. Like there's these women who also work with him. Yeah. And he's basically like he's basically like the boss of the company or whatever. Yeah. And like the assistants are like working and they always like are very like, you know, cheerful and like happy. And then like
they're like, you know, they're your typical like, you know, well brought up like professional assistants. Yeah. They like talk very polite and like, would you like some tea?
Yeah, and then like when, you know, like the one of the assistants, she's like, oh yeah, I'm gonna go home now. Like please don't call my husband, or like like when I leave, and like as soon as she leaves, he calls the husband. He's like, your wife is having an affair. Like what?
You can like tell, like, first of all, he's kind of weird, and I guess his birthday's coming up, as he kind of hints, and you can tell that he has a crush on one of his coworkers. Like he's kind of getting preppy. He keeps like looking back, and then it cuts to like later in the night, right? And then one of the assistants leaves, and then the other assistant is about to leave, and he's like kind of like whatever, like he's alone with her. Yeah. And he's like, okay, I'm going home too. He's like, I'm gonna go out, so you know what that means, right? I told my husband that I'm gonna be working late with you. He's like, so don't call my home again like you did last time. He's like, do you understand? He's like, do you understand? He's like, And she's like, good. And she takes off, and then he has like the husband on speed dial. I swear to God, he hits like one button.
He has it on speed dial, bro.
He like dials one button, and all he says is like, your wife is having an affair with you. And the way he hangs up the phone, he's like super discreet about it. And then like she comes back.
No, he starts singing, remember?
Oh yeah. He has the idea for the mountain song right then. And then she comes back and like beats the living shit out of him. Oh my God. That is probably like the gold scene for me.
Yo, speaking of like beating the shit out of somebody, there's that other scene where Hajime is like, I'm afraid of like girls. And then they show the first scene where it's like him sitting in the restaurant with the guy and the girl, and then they start talking about like breast surgery. And then after that, there's a scene in the like the quick mart kind of place.
Yeah, the convenience store.
Yeah, the convenience store. And like we just have the camera on Hajime, but we hear like the things that people like.
Yeah, it's like a customer
and the worker.
Yeah,
the cashier is talking about. And he's like, yo, like, what happened to your face? Like, and then the guy I guess is a customer, he's like, nah, it's not that bad. Like, it's fine. My face is fine. He's like, no, your nose is crooked. Like, it's like messed up. He's like, no, I'm telling you, it's fine. It's okay. And then at the end, you see the customer who leaves, and then you get a shot of the customer.
He's like, yo,
and
messed up.
His face is literally like an orc from Lord of the Rings.
It looked like he just got out of like a 12-round MMA match.
Yeah, dude. It's just so funny, dude.
I'm pretty sure that's the wife. Like that, there's no way that's a coincidence. This was the first time I picked up on that. I was like, oh, wait a minute.
Yeah,
maybe
dude,
that's it.
It's crazy.
Yeah. Or because I thought that in the convenience store, he said that it was his girlfriend.
I don't remember.
Or something like that.
Yeah.
But either way, she's having an affair, so maybe it was the boyfriend or whatever. But bro, she's a fighter, yo. That scene when she was beating up Iki had me like dying. The fact that it's a one take is golden. Like you needed it, and the way that she goes in for the knee and then like throws him on the ground, and she like starts jumping around. She's like, all right, let's go. And then he tries to confess to her in the middle of it.
She like picks up her bag and leaves again.
Yeah, she's like, I'm out. And then she still works there. And then like you go back and she's talking with the editor and like everything is good. Everything is cool again, you know.
She's okay with it. He's okay with it.
He's okay with it. Unspoken things. Yeah, that scene is great. That was chef's kiss. Should we talk about the mountain song?
Yeah, dude.
Iconic.
It's really catchy, actually.
It is. Iconic.
It's really catchy.
Yeah.
And then the grandpa comes to help with the recording. And then Ayano is the one who's mixing it.
He's like, and he gives it to his assistant. He's like, you master it. He's like,
and then the assistant's like, I think this is platinum, man.
yeah. And he's like, this is gonna be a hit. Man, yeah, that whole bit, like the whole dance routine, like the whole thing.
What the assistant is like helping with the piano and stuff.
Yeah. She's like, I can sing, I can play the piano. He's like, can you dance? She's like, dance. It's like, I guess. Oh man, and it's like, of course, the grandpa like comes in to help.
Yeah, dude.
Like of course. Yeah, that's that seems iconic for sure. Even if you don't watch this movie, just like look up Taste the Tea Mountain song. You just gotta watch it,
dude. Why I tell you about Japanese movies and having a funeral, or like having somebody die?
This is true.
In all of these movies, man.
This is true. I guess you kind of had to have some kind of dramatic moment in this movie.
It's not even that dramatic though.
It's not,
because they play it off very like solemn, but like very kind of straight.
He's just there.
Yeah.
Just like he just dies all of a sudden.
Mm.
Yeah.
And even like the funeral part, it's just like them kind of on the train.
Yeah.
Them seeing the smokestack. It's like very simple, but and then I guess the biggest, most emotional part would be like when they actually like go into his room and look for.
Yeah, that's what I was playing for sure. Yeah. When they find the books and everything.
Yeah.
I like how the flip book of the dad is like him as a kid. He's like
running.
I wonder why it was me as a kid.
Yeah.
And there's like that little shot of the family picture with him as a boy. And you're like, oh, that's kind of like, it's just a nice little touch.
Yeah.
that doesn't really need to be explained, but it's like as a father, you know, like he's his dad in a way. So that was kind of neat.
Like what I really liked about this movie is kind of what we mentioned about like the other movies that we watched in Park Chan-wook's the series is like not being afraid to like not tell the audience exactly what's happening in the movie.
Right.
You know, like I really like that about this movie as well, where like there's moments when like things happen and like you're just kind of like they're like talking about stuff, right? And you're not really sure the exact context of what's happening, but you can kind of make it out once they talk more and more about, like, for example, like the uncle, he's like wakes up early one morning and he starts like taking a walk, and there's this woman who is like opening up shop for the day, and the guy is there, and like they like, you know, they look at each other and they're like, oh,
they're like
they
super
have
awkward and
real
like,
really awkward moment with each other, and they start talking. And like in the moment, you're like, I don't even know who this woman is. Like, who the hell is she? And like, why is he like talking to her? And then once they talk a little more, you kind of get the idea. Oh, maybe like they had a thing for each other, and stuff were happening. And like, you know, you get that context from like as the scene progresses, right?
Exactly.
You're never really told that, or like there was never anything to signify that. Like there's never anything about that for Ayano before that, right?
Right.
And so it's like it's very interesting, and I think it's really cool and good that the director like trusts in the audience to understand what's happening in the moment, even without like them having to explain it.
Yeah, I mean, like, and too, I mean, everything is like everything that you need to understand it is in that scene too. Like, I mean, everything that in that dialogue gives enough explanation of like what their backstory is and like what their relationship was, and like, and obviously through their interaction there you kind of see what the relationship is like then, you know. Like it's obvious that they hadn't seen each other in quite a while, and that given like Ayano's been back in town for a while, that he's been avoiding her to some extent, you know. Like actually I never noticed that because he keeps going to the bridge but he never like crosses it, and there's a couple shots of like him looking out but never committing to it. I never pieced together that like on the other side of the bridge was her shop. I was like, oh, that makes so much sense.
But those are like the things that it's never told, right? You're never like, oh, like this is the girl who, you know, he's
the girl back home,
right? You're never given that context until he actually goes there, and then like if you catch it, then you catch it, but if you don't, you don't.
Yeah. In my case, I didn't for many years.
I mean, you only watched it twice.
This is true.
Plus maybe once more.
Maybe once that I completely don't remember, so it probably is my second. Yeah. I really like the baseball scene though, when he's like halfway through the bridge. Yeah. And then there's the baseball hitter and like by the river.
He throws a rock.
It throws a rock and it hits him in the head. And then it comes like he throws it a second time and it comes back like a bullet. I was genuinely like, holy shit. When it came back and like hit the rail, I totally forgot that happened.
I mean, it's like so far away. You can't, that little pebble will not even go that far, but
nah.
It's just like so funny how like they just do that.
It's a little surreal. You know, it's like in there. The guy's straight out of like a baseball anime, you know? It's like superhuman abilities.
Yeah. I also love the part when Sachiko is like at the playground again. And she's trying to do the horizontal bar. And then like she looks to the side, and then there's the guy who's buried in the mud, and she just stares at her and she starts running. Right?
She's like books it,
running back home, and then while she's running, there's the two guys again. Who's like working on the model, like trying to take like nice pictures of the mech, whatever. And then like. And then she just stops and she's like,
they're like, what happened?
Yeah.
Why are you running? It's like a no trespassing zone too. It's like you can't be
You're not supposed to be there, yeah.
She's like, mud man.
Mud man.
And they're like, what?
Yeah.
And then and it's hilarious. It's like full circle too, because it's the same drunk guy that was beating up on those kids.
Yeah.
And then they're the ones to save him. And that's why he's like super apologetic in that scene. And he's like super thankful when he digs them out. And they're just like, it's all right, bro. It's cool. And he gives him like the little towelette.
Yeah, he's like, keep it.
Yeah, that's yours. Like there's nothing for his face.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny.
Yeah. It's cool though, like how they weave those things in, you know?
Exactly. Yeah,
like,
everything
different
kind of comes full
characters.
circle. Yeah. So that's one thing I noticed too. Like, oh, there's a lot of like bow tying in the movie that I didn't really kind of notice the first time around. So that's neat.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, this time around, for my second watch through, there's, like I said, there's a couple scenes that I kind of forgotten or like repicked up, like we already talked about. But mainly it was just kind of having the experience of like re-enjoying the movie. Like, when it's been a while since you've seen a good movie and you're like, oh, I forgot that scene was there, or like, oh, now I remember that was there, and you're just re-enjoying it. It like adds a little bit of like freshness to it, like as if you'd seen it again in a way. Like that was definitely my relationship this time around. But the other biggest thing was the cameos. The people that are in this movie, I didn't know much about like cast members or like, famous actors and actresses in Japan at the time. But this time around, I was like, holy shit, like, isn't that person? And I was like, oh my God, that person's in it? I was like, wait a minute, were these people always in this movie? And I went through a list, and like, it's crazy how many people are in this movie. A lot of these people were like young too before they were famous. And I have a list here. Like for one, Kenichi Matsuyama, who was, we watched a movie with him in it too, actually.
The
Linda.
Oh.
Yeah. Remember, he was the guy that had a crush on Beduna.
I honestly don't remember.
You don't remember?
Yeah.
Isn't it weird that feels like forever ago?
Linda, yeah.
Linda. Yeah, he was the guy. He was the student that had a crush on her. So he's a veteran to the podcast.
Who was he in this movie?
In this movie, he was a background role. He was one of the kids that were going to do the prank in the restaurant. He had like the red sweater.
Okay.
Yeah, so that was him. I think he makes 2 appearances. I think he's in the library scene too. He was like one of the students on the side. But I was like, oh my God. He was actually going to be in, because we were talking about, we have another series coming up, and Norrain Wood was a movie we were considering, and he co-stars in it, along with Rinko Kikuchi, who's also in this movie. And she has like a super background role. And she's like really famous Japanese actress. Even here, if you ever watched, what's that Guillermo del Toro robot movie?
Huh?
Pacific Rim.
Oh, Pacific Rim.
She was the Japanese lady. Have you seen
I
it?
didn't watch it.
Oh my God, Lee, what is...
Anyways, move on.
This is, can anybody relate to me?
Pacific Rim.
Anyway, you'll probably know who Rinko Kikuchi is if you watch movies, guys.
Anyways, let's go on.
Yeah, she was in the noodle restaurant scene, the flashback.
Oh, okay.
She was the main server.
She was a server?
She was a server,
Oh, okay.
yeah. So like you gotta look to know it was her. I was like scrolling. I was like, where is she in this movie? Like what? Yeah, so super small. The grandfather is like old wife. So remember there were scenes where he's like looking at her. The photograph is Kirin Kiki. She's like probably like the most famous like old Japanese person. Like she's like in every movie. She's in it. I was like, oh my God, that was her. There's even like Ayano, right, who is played by Tarono Asano.
Yeah.
Tarono, we watched him in
Last Life in the Universe.
Last Life Universe. He plays Kenji. Everybody knows him as well. He's like the Asian person in every American film. He was like Raiden in Mortal Kombat recently.
Yeah.
Right? He plays Hogun in every Thor film. So yeah, he's in everything. He does like a lot of cool roles. Yeah, I kind of like him a lot. Who else? Iki Todoroki, who's the weird uncle, plays himself. Actually, like that's his name. He's actually not really an actor. He's an animator. He's actually the second AD and assistant director in the Evangelion films.
Oh.
In which Hideki Anno is also in this movie. Did you notice that? He's the he's like the club president or whatever for the wife.
Oh,
remember when they had dinner together?
Oh, the director.
Yeah. That was Hideki Anno. And him too, I was like, oh my God, what?
The director.
The director.
Who gives her flowers, right?
Yeah. So he's in this movie as well as his AD who plays Iki Todoroki. There's just like so many crazy people. It's weird. And then Susumu Terajima, who plays the dead Yakuza, he was in Sonatin.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's like one of the Yakuza guys.
I mean, you barely see their faces, so I like really couldn't tell.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah, there's and I'm sure there's a lot more that I'm not super familiar with, but I saw that there's like a lot more other cameos in this movie. And it's so weird for like I just think it's weird in like this film because like it's definitely not like a blockbuster film in any way, right? And I feel like this is still a really early I guess this is like right at his come up for the director, for Ishii-san. But like it still feels like I don't know, like the guy has so much pull. Like to have all these people in like my little personal project, you know? It's a lot of pull, yo. I could understand like Hideki Anno, like he comes from a an animator and commercial background, but like everybody else, like yo, it's kind of funny that they all took part.
Well, they were less famous back then.
yeah. Eniko Kokuji was like pretty much a nobody, and especially Kenichi Matsuyama was a nobody. But some other people, like the guy who plays in Sonatin, like he's really famous over there.
Yeah.
He's like the Yakuza guy back then. So that was like really neat to come back and be like, oh my, whoa, why are all these people here all of a sudden? Oh no.
Yeah.
But yeah, overall, this movie's a treasure in my opinion. You know, I definitely like try to like I said, stay back from it and just like watch it every once in a while. But it's one of the few movies I think that I would 100% recommend to like everybody. I'd be like, you gotta watch this movie. Like I think it's like another true display of like Japanese cinema. Be like if you really kind of want to dip your toes in and see what they have to offer, like this is definitely something you'll really really enjoy. You know.
Same for me. Like first time watching it, but I think it goes down as one of the great movies as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Definitely. Thank you for introducing me to it.
I get like 2 good ones a year, in his eyes anyway. In his eyes. But yeah, I was really really excited to watch this movie again. So I'm really glad that I was able to come back to it.
Yeah.
And it's just like when I was doing like the notes and stuff, like re-scrolling, like that joke is awesome. Singing along to the mountain song stuff. Actually, my favorite scene when I first watched this was the triangle song scene.
The triangle?
When it's like a little bit. It's like at night, and the grandfather's like singing like, "Why are you a triangle?" And the Sachiko's there like curled in her pink pajamas, like like in a triangle. It's like Nanda no Sakaku.
Oh, that moment.
Yeah. It's just like, what? It's so random.
I love how the grandpa always like barges into the room.
Yeah. When he was like sleeping
with Hajime, and then they like start like doing the fight
together. Yeah. We play fighting together. Yeah. It's fine. I like how I like that whole scene where so like before that, like given everything that they were going through, and then he was like him, Ayano, and Sachiko. I guess they all slept in the same room in the futon together. And it's like at night and they're going to bed, but they're all like can't sleep at the same time. They're all like worrying about.
They all have their own problems.
Yeah.
That they're thinking about.
And then the next morning, like Sachiko gets up immediately after a weird dream and like goes back to like does the backflip. And then Ayano like is like, huh? And like he leaves to do his business. And then Hajime wakes up. He's like, nah. And it's just like rolling around, probably thinking about Aoi, you know? Yeah. Like, it just works. It's kind of funny. Oh, man. I really like how Ayano, there's just a weird, like, relationship between Ayano and Sachiko. Like, they're always leaving the house and, like, doing their own thing. But they leave at the same time and come back at the same time. And the parents are always like, where's Ayano and Sachiko? Like, are they out together?
Yeah, I love that about the family dynamic too. Like, Sachiko is like the youngest one, right?
Yeah.
And they don't give two craps about where she is or what she does.
Yeah.
Like what she's thinking about. Like, they never talk to her about anything. Like, they're just there. She just there. She just does her own thing and like
comes back whenever. And
like, it's just it is what it is. You know, like it's so good.
And like
that dynamic.
She like leaves early morning to do the flip, and then she comes back like later morning for breakfast. And the mom's like, "Oh, where's Sachiko?" And she comes and sits. She's like, "Oh, are you hungry?" He's like, "Yeah." And he's like, "Oh, look, see, there she is. Like, I told you she'd be back."
Yeah. This
like,
8-year-old kid, she goes wherever she wants. You don't care.
no parental guidance.
Yeah.
Like none whatsoever. Oh my god! And then like she hardly goes to school. And even Iona's like, there's no school today. She's like, "Oh no, it's like a whatever holiday." She's like, "Oh."
This was 2004 movie, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it's aged really well, for sure. Still feels awesome. So funny. So many little things. I'll piggyback off what you said too. Like the what really makes it like good and like special is the fact that outside of like all the funniness, there is like a tranquil element, and there are times where it's just like very chill, and that like even like cinematography wise, like just beautiful shots of like the landscape and like
the water,
like just here's this very like
trees.
Quiet town, you know, just like weird things happen in it, but it's like the world is kind of slowed down in a little way, and like you said, it's kind of like a really like thematic thing where the family comes back once in a while, and like they just kind of, whether it's like for breakfast, like they obviously come for breakfast, for dinner, but they also come for like tea time basically, and they're literally just kind of
chilling
and, like,
on the
absorbing, and just like it's almost like meditative basically,
Yeah.
and they're just drinking tea on the deck, you know. And like I said, it's like it's not all the time that every member is there, but the moment is still there, you know, with whoever
with
is
the
there.
families, yeah,
Right,
whoever's
yeah.
there at the moment.
And it just feels like I said, it's like a central part of just
Yeah.
like that family dynamic. Like this is a time that we take to kind of regroup, you know.
Yeah, that's what I really love about like Japanese houses. Even Korean houses have these, where it's like the it's like a deck,
Right.
but then it's like there's like no like doors or anything. It's kind of open to the environment,
Right,
to
yeah.
the nature. I really love that, like those kinds of houses. It's usually in rural places.
Right.
Even in Korea, like it's usually like rural houses that have that, like where it's like an open deck kind of area where you can kind of like
Just
enjoy the nature and kind of let the nature in. And I think those houses really lend itself to kind of that
yeah, for sure.
peace and tranquility and
Yeah.
enjoying and embracing nature and all of that, you know.
It's a place to just chill. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? Just like
Especially like when you have people like that together,
Right.
and you're able to enjoy that together.
it's an easy frame. It's an easy shot to get for sure. You know,
Mm.
it's like a gimme. Yeah. I really like they're sitting there, and then like Sachiko was, I guess she was gonna confess or something to Ayano, and he's like, "Yeah," and then she just like abandons them and like runs to the room, like doesn't say a word. He's like,
Yeah.
"What did I do?"
Yeah, because she was about to tell him about
Yeah,
her issues.
or like ask him or something.
Yeah.
But she's like, "Nah, I can't say it. I can't do it. I can't do it."
Yeah.
But yeah, it's all really, like I said, it's all kind of like really sweet. You know, it really adds to that dynamic.
And then the ending when they all like look at the sunset together.
Right. Yeah.
Well, everyone's like in different places, but they all look at the sunset together.
It's kind of cool.
Yeah.
It's funny this is actually like an element that I completely forgot about the movie. Like it's easy, like it's easy to get kind of hung up on the comedy aspects because it is definitely out there. But like when I was watching it, I thought, oh, I could have definitely picked this for the family series.
Yeah.
Like it 100% would have been in there, but I didn't even
Think about it.
or like thought it qualified in that sense. Like I was so headstrong and like we got to do a comedy series. Like I got to throw this in there. But upon second review, it's a little.
You know, it's interesting because when I watched the trailer, it was very heavily
marketed that
marketed that way. Yeah, like comedy. But when I watched it, it's like
that's not really the tone of it.
it's not like, for me, it didn't feel like it was the focal point. Like
Right.
it's definitely part of it. It's a big part of it, but like the main through line of it, I didn't feel like that it was comedy.
I agree. Yeah. 100% agree. Let's see. Anything else? Anything else you wanted to add? I just want to say I totally forgot the interpretive dancer was in here too.
Interpretive dance?
Yeah, that weird dance guy.
Oh, yeah.
I was like, oh, I totally forgot about that guy. He looks like a chicken.
Is he somebody famous?
No, not at all.
Okay.
Just like.
But yeah, that was so weird too when he came, and then Ayano like just brings him home. And then
No.
they eat together.
This
like,
This is my let's trip out and get
and
hypnotized
then
together.
he's like, oh, he's so good at this, and then
Yeah,
he's like, oh, you really are good at it.
Such a weird
Dynamic.
even that where is this coming from?
Yeah.
Then he gets hypnotized. I love how I guess that was the last day that he was in town that he mentioned, and he was like, I want to do the hypnotism thing, and then he gets the dancer guy into it, and then afterward when he snaps him out and they're gonna drink tea at the night, they're all like, this was the trip that I went on, this was this is how I felt in my dream.
Yeah.
And all he sees the interpreted dancer he's re-inspired again, and he's just dancing and coming up with moves. It's just solid, just all around solid.
Yeah, I really like the moment with Yoshiko and Sachiko when they're sleeping right after the hypnotism thing, and Sachiko's like, oh, so what was your hypnotism of, what did you
dream about?
Yeah, dream about, or what did you what were you going into? And she's like, oh, I can't explain it, it's just something that you have to feel.
Yeah. But you get the shot of it, right?
Yeah, you
there's
do.
that weird CGI
where she turns
explodes
into colors, yeah.
some weird rainbow loops.
Yeah.
She's like, and then I just got enveloped by all of them all at the same time.
Yeah.
He's like, and then nothing else mattered. And the daughter's like, yo, what the fuck is she talking about? Oh, man. Yeah, definitely number one. This is a good.
You know what's interesting for that, though, is the way that they explain it, it's very abstract, right?
Yeah.
But I can kind of understand what they're talking about.
Well, yeah,
that's the weird part about it. Even the imagery of what they're using, it's it's so abstract and it's so far fetched, and it's it looks like WTF, right? What what is this? But you can kind of have an idea of what they're trying to go, what they're trying to show, or what the meaning is of the image that we're seeing, which is kind of interesting.
Yeah.
For that, for the exploding colors, when Yoshiko does that, but also when Sachiko finally has it. You said it was enlightenment, right?
Right.
It's funny how you can come to that conclusion, right? With that imagery, you know what I mean? It's a weird ass thing that's happening. This sunflower that keeps growing and growing and growing, and it's just engulfing the whole world. And then finally, the large Sachiko falls back down, right?
Yeah, she goes up.
She goes up first, and then she comes back down. Yeah. But it's when you just look at that image, it's hard to find an interpretation of that.
Yeah.
But for you and for me, and I think for a lot of people, you kind of have the understanding that it's some kind of enlightenment, or some kind of I finally
I get it.
I get it, or I finally passed this predicament, this thing that I've had. It's able to successfully, do that with the image, and I think that's very interesting how that is. Yeah. That it could have been anything, to be honest, right? It could have been. It didn't have to be a sunflower. It could have been some weird ass other thing that they could have done, right? But it is what it is, but it also works, and that's something that's so crazy to me, because it's I would never have thought about doing something like that, right?
Yeah.
And so it's so, I don't know, it works well, and yet I'm so confused as to how it works. That way.
What,
why it does that?
Why'd you make that choice?
Yeah.
And why did it work? Yeah, no, I agree. To that point, I also it just works within the character. Going back to the mom, when we see the weird CGI acid trip of her dream, and then she's explaining it to her daughter, and one, she does a pretty good explanation of what we saw.
Yeah.
Verbally, I was like, oh yeah, that's pretty good. But also it makes sense that she would dream that just from her character. She's an artist, right? And she's very not super flamboyant, but she does have she's a very creative personality, and it just makes sense that oh, she thinks about art subconsciously.
Also, she's never able to kind of do that outwardly, right? She's not able to fully express that, and
exactly.
That's her arc too, right? At the end, she finally is able to kind of do that. But at that point in the movie, she hasn't been able to do that.
Right.
So the dream is kind of a proxy for that
Mm.
in allowing her to like explode into color.
Like,
Finally, like, you know,
just
let
being
loose.
engulfed in this world of art and colors and creativity. Like it just like it completely makes sense for like who they are and like why they would, you know, just kind of experience or think about that sort of thing, you know. And even for Sachiko, with like, you know, we get little hints and kind of scenes of like even a sunflower, right? Like with the weird comedy bit on the TV. There's like that weird moment where like it cuts to like the interruption page and it's like
the little girl.
Yeah, like
paint, like the drawing of the girl and the sunflower.
And the sunflower, and then like she's like focused on like the girl in the sunflower, like it's some kind of reflection upon herself, you know?
Right. Also, the moment when she looks at the flip book.
Yeah, exactly.
And then there's like the grandpa draws a sunflower and the girls, and
so everything
comes together,
comes full circle, right? Nothing is wasted. So yeah, it's a lot, you know. It deserves a second watch, guys. There's a lot to pick up. So I think that's pretty much it. So that is Taste of Tea, and next week we'll be into week number 3. We'll be watching My Love Story. It's another Japanese film. This one came out in 2015. I was gonna say it's a little more recent, but man, isn't it hard to think that was like
7 years ago?
7 years ago.
Dang.
Woo. Crazy.
Dang.
This one's directed by Hayato Okwai, and this is My Love Story is actually an adaptation of a manga, and it's also an anime. So this is a live action, but it's pure like campy like anime comedy. Basically, it's basically what I can say. But it is funny. I think it works well. It like stays strong in the campiness. You know what I mean?
We'll see.
We'll figure it out. I'm honestly like in my mind, I have the illusion like this movie was so funny when I watched it. I don't know if it's gonna age well. Like I don't know if I'm gonna watch it now and be like, I wish I was as ignorant as I was back then to enjoy it. You know, we'll find out. So we'll see you then. Again, just a shout out to our Patreon page. Got some cool and exclusive stuff there. Check out the list, and every episode will be there. You don't have to listen to our ads as well. And, you know, join the club. You know, we want to engage with you guys and want to give you a couple bonuses there. Hope you guys like the video. See you next week.
Bye.